you know, the state law hasn't changed, but then the next year, everybody's levy has to be lowered because that goes into effect. And
He brings a good point, though. I mean, you both do. If our consideration with you is what Rolling Hills as an entity has as a financial balance, his point is that our locals are not in that consideration as to what you need to bring. And so, I mean, you make a good point. I don't argue that, but your involvement has to be what the Rolling Hills balance is, not what we're holding locally.
That's true.
Yeah.
Because we could have locally, we could have 40 or 45% and still have a regional-wise target of 30%.
So, after hearing that discussion, Don, what are your thoughts?
I'm sorry, I was trying to find the percentages for you guys and
Well,
everybody's county balances.
I mean,
It took a little bit.
it really doesn't affect, what affects your involvement or your inclusion is what Rolling Hills is holding. But not what the counties are holding until you take into consideration of the state as they're looking at it as an aggregate. But
And that I guess that's my worry is if let's say the state law doesn't change, and at the end of the day, they say, okay, your Rolling Hills regional fund balance is 30, but you have these other county fund balances, and they say we're not looking at them separately. Once we combine them all, now they're at 42%, and yet Woodbury has targeted something. You see what I'm saying? My worry is, I understand that, but right now, the state law says, as I read it, it doesn't matter.
We've got two sets of books, so we got the state law and then we got our set of books. I mean, really, we do. Well, don't we? Do I understand that correctly?
Well, it really isn't two sets of books, but we have, you know, what we levy on counties, all our consideration is that we have to meet our contribution to the region, you know, our regional obligation.
Absolutely.
And whether we choose to have a balance in it or whether we choose to run it to zero is totally within our individual county boards.
Until you figure the
But the
20%
second,
aggregate.
but the
But
second,
yeah, but they
Until the
figure the
state
20% aggregate. Is there any, and I haven't seen any formula on how they're going to redistribute it if you're over. Whether that comes back on a per capita basis, it would make sense that if the region's over, say it's 10% over, that extra 10% would be rebated back to the counties on a per
Each
capita basis, and then we
individual
use it for
county.
property tax relief.
Yep. You're
So-
absolutely right.
So then,
But there is no formula that I'm aware of. And
I haven't
do
seen
that.
it either.
And that's why, okay, so what I've got highlighted here, this shows what I'm projecting for the ending balances for each individual county this year. Get that over. And so, I mean, essentially, each county is going to be pretty close. And then when we take into consideration next year's levy, we're going to take these balances down to zero to set levies for next year.
So your intent or your recommendation is to zero the local balances?
You know, as I've really pondered this new information, it does not really make any valid sense for counties to hold any dollars. If you think about it, everything that you're paying out in salaries comes from the region. So you're going to have that money sitting there throughout the course of the year, and then there needs to be that reconciliation with county auditor at the end of the year, because you know there may be a fifth payday or fifth. Wouldn't that be nice? A third payday in a month, a couple of times that we didn't account for. So there may be some wiggle room there that we're going to have to make up with those county auditors. But for the most part, you know, this money that you see here is just helping to offset what you're setting for your levies. Otherwise, you're not expending that.
Yeah.
And then in the future, it's just passed through, whatever.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
But those ending balances, though, those could be zeroed out. We're still not we'll be able to get all that done in 1 year, one fiscal year. There's still not gonna be one
And
county's
so-
still not gonna be holding, they could,
Yeah, which is why I was not able to even do a projection on levy figures yet, because we need to figure out what that per capita needs to be, including what we're going to spend in core services next year with Woodbury, and then come up, whether it's 25, 14, if we're gonna really spend down our balance by a significant amount. Then we gotta figure out how you're going to be able to levy with your ending balance projection to be able to meet your first, or property tax target, per capita, excuse me.
Does that clear that up? I mean,
I think, like you say, get them close to zero, but I'd still like to keep just a small amount in our county. Say if payday's on July 1st, are you gonna get us a check there right away so that we can pay Lisa and our advocate right away? We need a little bit of money so we can write the check.
well, he's really protecting you, Lisa.
I guess I'm confused. Are you saying all 7 counties could or could not get to zero in one budget year?
I think we've got.
Oh,
Good, sure.
Could easily.
Yeah, unless you're holding more than 100% of what you have.
Well,
Yeah.
look right there. There's no question that you couldn't zero it if that's what you choose to do. What's so bad in that consideration in the following years it's passed through, and then as demands go up for more dollars, there's going to be sticker shock. You know, we've been padding that in that you can kind of make it somewhat stable or straight across as far as what you're asking is with those reserve dollars. Well, that's going to be all gone. So it will be simply passed through.
Well, it's good that we were able to spend down our excess money, but we've gotten that done
Yeah. Well,
region-wide.
I know of one region in Iowa that their budget this year, they did not ask any of the counties to contribute. Because they were sitting on such a large balance. And so they had, this fiscal year, they're trying to get it down, and then this coming fiscal year, they'll work on it.
So the counties have a tax holiday.
Well, they said what they did was just they increased on the general, your general and general supplemental enough to where they took up the slack, and they put a cushion in there so that when they have to, in 2021, then they can go ahead and levy for the mental health
And reduce
Yeah,
their.
and reduce the general and kind of,
Yeah, we did about the same thing.
try to,
Well, that's what we all try to avoid is budget spiking, and I guess going to zero is going to accelerate that. I'm not in
Well, no,
favor of
'cause
going to
you're-
zero.
Cecil, you're gonna go to zero in your fund balance.
local funding.
Yeah,
Right.
You're
I'm
still
saying
gonna, you're
local.
still gonna have to levy
Yeah.
and make your commitment.
But I mean, I can do a different projection to get you to 30%, on the county level, but it's just gonna further increase what we need to reduce in the region.
Right. Exactly.
unless we ignore it.
Or for the counties that have staff retaining a certain percentage so that you have that money available.
The commission's fully aware of it. Everything we've sent to the governor, everything we send to the legislatures addresses 20 and 25% target. We're just saying, you can't expect us to expand core services as much as what we did with our last rule package and have the regions go down basically broke or in the hole. The ones that are at 20% will be in the hole starting out, and then try to do all these core services, the additional core. So, whether the legislature chooses to agree with us or not, I guess is yet to be seen. But the work group on, multi-occurring or conditions, the co-occurring conditions, the legislature pretty much gave everything that they recommended and put it into code. So if they follow suit, hopefully
Well, and then
we're
Friday-
trying to tell them to get rid of the cap.
Yeah, and the fiscal viability study committee meets again on Friday, the 14th.
Any and all supervisors are encouraged to attend, and regional CEOs.
No. I'm in Sioux City on Friday.
Jeremy?
Just, I promise, last question. So process-wise with the MOU, because the 2080 now looks back to the MOU and says you've got to meet these provisions, do you anticipate that on or the 27th or at some date thereafter, there would be that consideration of, let's say, the 30% threshold needing to be met to bring forward. Because right now, the way it, the million plus the 25%, we're sort of in a bind. So just wanted to see process-wise, and then does that need to go back through the, I don't know how that works as far as if there's a change to that.
I guess maybe I shouldn't answer that, but you, I would hope that you certainly need that before certification. I mean, you have to have it, and we'll come back to this 28E, but yeah, there's going to have to be a targeted and a drop dead date as to what this is what we have to have, and so you can proceed. There's no question about that.
Right, which is why when I use the word softening, that was my first words. What I'm thinking is, because I have it written in here about the MOU, they have to meet that. It's similar to our finances or other means, because then we have it clarified that this is what our expectation is in terms of the MOU. But considering this new information, if we add language to this statement that covers us to make some adjustments if it's going to put us way over in our fund balance. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? So, or other means. So if we decide that with the 1.8 million in the MOU that we're expecting them to come in with, if that's going to put us in a projection way over the 20% as a region, then we could designate other means, because right now we have the MOU that is a contract between Woodbury and the region that we have to follow, and we have it stipulated that's their entrance ability,
What do you mean other means? I guess that was my question.
as determined by the governance board. So that there's flexibility in that statement, so that if we decide, oh, they don't need the 1.8 million because they're gonna put us way over, maybe they need $1 million or 800,000, I'm just throwing figures out. And then that gives you the ability so that we don't have to go back and amend our 28E stating, or we could change this language altogether, however you want to do it.
When's our reconciliation date?
Or,
They come in, I think the MOU calls for them to come in with $1 million, but then we also stated a reconciliation date to
October.
adjust for that.
October of 2020.
So, I mean, could we make, of course, that would just change your balances, but if that, would that reconciliation date fall if we change when we make our first contribution to the region, to where if they're over, that whatever over they are would just be credited to that contribution, and then they would just have a larger fund balance in the county level rather than in the region level.
Yeah, I
But,
guess my worry is that we'll come forward with a million plus our 25-30%. We would have to be up at $40-41, exceeding our 30-49, and then turn around afterwards and take that million back, so to speak, assuming the legislature doesn't change. I think that those are all complications of it, if that makes sense. I mean, if you all stay the same right now and don't shoot for 30%, then we all have parity, which was where we were at originally.
Well, we're going to try to shoot for 30% on the regional. It's just like what we're holding in our county levels, we're excluding that from that 30%. So what you have to meet, if I understand everything correctly, is you have to meet on a per capita basis what the region is holding.
So would it be fair to say we need to meet 30% of our, and then if we never spent any of it because we're fully covering our expenses, then at the end we'd still have 30%. You all would have 30% and we'd be on, or am I not?
Yeah, I think somehow we're cross-talking here.
What I've understood you proposing, Dennis, is that they delay their payment of somewhat in order to keep our percentage down and then get payment
At
from them.
the 3049, if I understood correctly, you would meet, you're projecting that you can meet the $1 million on July 1, plus the 800,000 in October. That's
No,
not
not
something-
at 30, not at 30-49.
not at the 3049. all right, and then,
Yeah, we would need, if you all said you have to come in with 25% plus $1 million, we would need to be way up, and we would need to ask to be somehow in that 2080 signed in so that we could exceed the 3049. There's just no way, at roughly 100,000 population, 3049 was $3 million, and we just looked at a budget that was 3.3 million. Just, there's,
no, but you're gonna have your tax money for that,
Yeah, for that 25%.
for the 25%, you'll have your tax money for the next fiscal year.
But what you bring in September, you should pay your 25%, your 800 and some thousand, right? So if you're coming in with $1.4 million and you got $1 million in July, you said that leaves you like $500,000 left in your county budget.
And then you'll have tax money on the end of September.
Well, if we delay the quarterly payments on July 1st, all they really need is their per capita,
Is there one?
per capita period.
Yeah, for the 1 million, whatever.
Whatever that number is, it may be a little more, it may be less. But that's all they really need July 1st,
Yeah.
if we delay the quarterly payments.
We can make when we get our distribution from Sioux Rivers, they gotta hold back some for the accrual stuff. But once we get that distribution, we can pay over the 825,000, because that'll be a check to us that we can transfer our 25% over. Then we gotta come up with $1 million plus the $33 for the budget.
okay, $1 million plus $33 for the budget.
Right.
You've got to be able to tax them for that $1 million, correct? Or-
Depends what our distribution is from the region. That's pretty key, how much we gotta tax. Because if we get $1.4 million, we gotta take whatever the percentage is, say 800,000, then we got 600,000 applied to the $1 million. Then the difference between the $1 million and the 600 is what we're gonna have to levy to make up the $1 million.
Why are you taking the 800,000 off the 1.4? Won't you collect that?
We gotta come up with a 25%. This is gonna be a check back from Sioux Rivers. So we're sitting here with a check. We should be able to take 825 out of that. As soon as we get that check, transfer that over to the region, then we covered our 25 or 30%, whatever the number's gonna be. Then the balance that's left there can be an offset to the $1 million.
But that's still an additional 400,000
Yes, yes.
over and above.
The 33.
Am I looking at this wrong? Doesn't the per capita need to be paid first? Because if we delay, you don't need to transfer that 800,000 right away to the current services budget.
Well, we would.
If we
cover our
delay payments.
25%. We would have transfer over, cover our 25% of expenditures, because we have zero in there right now in your region to cover that 25%. So as soon as we get a check, we need to move the 20 or 25.
Oh, I see it.
Over to
Okay.
cover our expenses. Is that kind of clear?
Oh, but your expenses as of July 1 will be coming out of the regional budget.
Out of your region budget. So we need, as soon as possible, get the 825 over to you, which will come from the distribution. Is that right, Don? Then we cover our 25%. Then each quarter, out of that $33 for the actual budget, we move over each quarter, and then we gotta come up with $1 million extra, if that's the money, but that'll come from our distribution.
Which you
No,
don't have.
we don't have.
You don't have that left. You have 600 some
600,
thousand. You have
yes.
600,000 left,
Right.
and you owe $1 million, so you owe an extra 400,000.
Correct.
At the 3363, which we looked at tonight, let's just add another $4. We're at 37.
Well, you're
And-
doubling in there, aren't you?
Huh?
Aren't you doubling up something in there?
No.
Because you come in at the per capita, what we have as a region. Whatever
Well,
our
we're having
per
different
capita
per capita
balance
than what
is
you have as
at
a
the
region.
end of the fiscal year would be what you have to come up per capita wise at the end of, on July 1.
We're going to have a different per capita because we've got to cover our expenses. You all might drop yours from 27 down to 22 or 23 because we're sort of running in parallel universes. But
The
you
first
said
year.
rightly that first year, you're going to have to cover the full expenses on your own. And so if we're at 3363, or if we've got to come up to this $1 million, we could be at 3763. And my fear with that is we're going to be at 3763, and that exceeds our 3049 currently. We can't do that without assigned 2080. And we're doing so in order to levy an extra $1 million that we may very well the next year give back
Because of fund balance.
because of fund balance. If we came in with 30% and we didn't spend $1 more than was budgeted, and we've got to cover our expenses, at the end of the year, we'll end with, and we'll still have 30%. That would be,
Dennis, when you keep saying you gotta pay it right away, that's for expenses that start July 1st.
Correct.
So
Because
$1
we,
million is gonna be on parity what we ended June 30th, right?
correct.
Okay, so now then all old bills should be taken care of with your $1 million plus what we have in reserves for our bills. Now we're all starting on July 1st. If the rest of us aren't gonna make any payments till the end of the quarter.
Right. And we aren't either on the
We'll have
actual
bills
budget.
starting up on July 1st, so you need, to me, the $1 million gotta come in basically first to cover up. Well, we're getting, I still think you guys are coming up with two bills.
Yeah, you're doubling up.
On the million?
You're doubling up somewhere because you just gotta come in on parity with us and then your tax money, what you levy for this next fiscal
That
year,
goes up to your 33.
you'll have that coming into your treasury.
but
Yeah, I
right
think
now you
there's-
have about 2 million.
Oh,
And, I mean, it says here, actual estimated fund balance 2019 is at 2 million. I'm on the screen
For the
sheet.
region.
for the region.
Right. But I thought we were always looking at it on a per capita basis. We had to be on parity. We have,
Well, that is for the reserve balance. But actually, I think what's a little confusing, there's actually two per capitas. One is the per capita number needed to be on parity for the reserve balance only. And then the other one is the per capita that you're going to levy to fulfill your obligation. But as I understand this, if you come in July 1 with whatever your per capita, and we've always used $1 million, if you put that $1 million up July 1, you have the privilege of using the reserve for the region to pay your expenses on July 1,
Sure.
just like the rest of the counties.
End of June, what's our projected fund balance? It must not be the 800
it's
some
2
thousand.
2,341,000.
800 is like 2 years from now, so that's where you
Right,
guys are coming in.
and that's where we were always setting this as a target, and I remember writing this down in our previous discussion. This 874,000 at the end of 2020, I wrote down that's over and above the 25%, because I didn't realize that you had the county and the region balances. So we were trying to figure out a way, how do we match that over and above the 25%? So we had our 25% plus $1 million. Sorry,
I think we're making this more difficult
Yeah, we are.
than we need
And I
to.
think it's gonna
That's on
be
every
easier to
end.
understand once that we actually start doing the projections based on whatever budget we select with the core services.
The other piece is, we're looking at our balance. Our expectation is that you meet parity in our projected balance when you come in. Any of the, which means only in the Rolling Hills entity. Anything that's outside of that, as your local balance would be, is not in consideration of being in parity. Your parity only needs to be considered what's in the Rolling Hill balance, not anything to do with what anybody's holding locally. Right?
Yeah, we could have 30 and they could have 5%
Locally.
locally.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's your parity needs to meet what's in the Rolling Hills entity account for reserve balances, because we've all contributed to the Rolling Hill balance. Anything that anybody holds out, yes, is considered in the 20 or 25% that the state is looking at, but that has nothing to do with what parity means as far as what your obligation is as far as the Rolling Hills part of it. And we need to clear that. It's I think it's getting muddied.
I think it is too. I think we need to break it out on paper as to, because we're looking at that figure and that's not correct, because the figure that they're gotta come in on parity at is.
That figure
FY20.
includes local balances.
But
Yeah, but
here's the
that's,
regional.
that's
imbalance.
FY19, isn't it? That's ending balance FY19.
For this year, we're looking at 2,268,415.
That's FY20.
No, this is
Oh.
FY19.
I took everybody's June 30th ending balances
All
for
right.
18, re-estimated expenditures, revenues for the counties and your levies off of the Department of Management website, and this is what our projected ending balance.
But Don,
They got-
again, that includes local balances. That,
This one does not, this one does not.
Yeah, but the 2.2 at this point does not enter into what they have to come in with. They have to pay their expenses this year and come in at parity in our ending balance of FY '20.
20,
Right.
because they're paying for their own bills this year, so it's not till 20 ending balance that will come in.
If that's true, and I don't disagree with that, if you are down to your 25%, your 25% here projected is about 874,000.
Right.
And so you'll shed from that 2.2 million down to 874 with your levy reduction, right?
correct.
And so we would need to come in with, let's say 25%, and if we don't spend $1 of it, we'll have 25% at the end.
But that's it.
But then that million,
That million's what covers that.
but the
But
way
it's
the
upfront.
MOU reads right now, that
Well,
it's an and,
I'll just
million
I'll
plus
clear
the-
this up real quickly.
Okay.
We'll take your extra million.
That's a good way to
No, I think we're confusing.
Yeah.
The ending fund balance of the Rolling Hills entity is projected to be the 874, and that's what you have to match.
And that's absolutely acceptable to us. But we believe right now that the way the MOU reads, unless I'm reading it wrong, is it's 1 million plus 25%. And I think that's
It is.
the way it is right now. And the reason is that we were looking, and this was the case, that you would end with 874,000, and that would be over and above the 25% because of your county balances. And so if we can just cover at 30%, which would be about $936,000, if we could cover that, or if it was $1 million and we went through reconciliation, we would be fine. But we can't do both. We can't do $1 million and 825, or we exceed our.
Oh, but you'll have your tax money for the next fiscal year for the 825.
And that's fine if we don't have to come up with, but we've been looking at doing both. That's what we've been looking at doing.
Are we
Sorry.
off path here, Don?
I'm following what Jeremy's saying, because the MOU does state that they have to come in with $1 million plus their 25% on July 1st. So that's 1.8 million they have to contribute,
But a year down the road, after.
right? So at the end of that fiscal year, we were planning to spend down our balance to get to that 874 that he's mentioning, and then they're gonna have the $1 million. However, they're gonna have foreign tax. Okay, so this is where Jeremy and I got hung up on this conversation on Friday, because we were looking at it from two different angles before he realized we had county balances. Because what he's saying is that if the 870 or 800,000 they have to contribute their 25%, they're going to get taxes in twice a year for that to happen. So 1.6 plus the $1 million they contribute. And I said no, because the counties hold the balances, so you're going to have your 25% sitting out there. Well, now we find this out from the Department of Management that we can't have that sitting there. So that's where it changes things, because once they tax twice at the 1.6 and 1.6 to meet their budget, they're going to have that money that they're going to contribute to the region, plus the $1 million in reserve.
I have as far as the parity on reserve balance, are we using the balance as of 7/1/19 or 7/1/20?
20.
Wouldn't it have, we end the 7-county region as of 6/30/19. So shouldn't their per capita be based on that number? Because starting 7/1/19, we're operating as an 8-county unit, and so they're going to be tapping those numbers.
We won't be allowed to, and I think that's a good protection for you, because we have to meet our obligations on our own.
For that first
Otherwise-
year.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Yes.
otherwise your counties would say, wait a second. We have $2.2 million. Why is Woodbury County using our 7 counties to lower our levy? We're gonna have to cover 100% that first year.
And that's why the arrangement was made to consider that, because then that got the reserve balance down to something that they could meet. 874 or $1 million.
I guess I do
That-
remember
They
that
agreed
now.
to meet their obligations for the first year, and then that allowed the Rolling Hills entity to get our reserve balance down to a figure that they could work with.
The flip to that funding would be everybody to be equal on 7/119, and then we'd all have the same levy as well, because then we'd be paying as we go.
And our difficulty with that, Cecil, and I completely agree with you, is we'd have to come up with about $2.4 million
Yeah.
Right.
in one,
Right.
and we'd be levying at 60 per.
Right. And
Just to
that's
get
what,
it
that's
back,
how
you
we
know?
kind of work through that.
Again, I go back to, we have a meeting with the Woodbury County providers, and I'm simplifying this for you. We have a meeting with the providers, with our regional providers, and prioritize crisis services that we want to invest in FY20 when Woodbury County joins us. Then we can identify out of that 2.2 million, what is gonna be invested in services? And then let's say it's 1.5 million or 1.75. What is the remainder? So that money that we're gonna invest in core services will be encumbered by service for fiscal year 20. So that can sit there, and that is taken out of the equation for the property tax relief year of fiscal year 2020. It could still sit there. But we have to separate that out, and then it could be that we are projecting with our encumbered funds being taken out, only a $600,000 fund balance. That's where it gets really complicated. So I think until we do that prioritization of services, it's hard for us to even say where we're gonna be.
I forgot the caveat of being able to designate dollars.
And I mean, I'm sure as supervisors, you're looking at, we've got 2.2 million sitting there, let's look at 30% and provide property tax relief the next year. But the problem in doing that is that we can't invest in any core services, and then you're gonna have that huge spike the following years. So that's where I'm thinking we need to figure out what services we want to invest in and how much we want to allocate towards that and encumber it, and then figure out how much money we're gonna actually have sitting in our balance to figure out parity with Woodbury, which is where I go back to our 2080 and saying the hard language about Woodbury County is considered a member county July 1st of 19 if they meet the provisions of the MOU, which we had it clearly identified, $1 million plus 25%. It may not be that. If we encumber 75% of our projected 19 ending balance for services, then the MOU, it doesn't even meet parity with us, because we're going to be further down in fiscal year 20.
Well, but that was also considered, that's why the reconciliation thing would happen. If it was $1 million, it was $1 million. If it was 800, their obligation was 800. I mean, that was.
And I've always been, if it was $1 million, if it was an either or, that's fine. But Dawn's right. Right now it reads that it's both. It's $1 million plus 820.
What a deal.
It doesn't say nothing about 820, it says
Or
first
25%,
quarter payment.
which
in
would be
July
about 8.
sometime.
25%.
That's when the rest of us do that.
Mm-hmm.
And $1 million.
But you settle it though in October.
Of 2020.
Of 20.
Yeah. It's like Rick's saying, if our balance is less, they put in a lot less. So to me, it still fluctuates if we go off the MOU, right?
The other piece I want to throw out there after the discussion of designating dollars, you have to also remember those designated funds were one-time funds. You'll have to raise that the following years if you make that investment. Those designated dollars to start these services are going to be part of the next budget. It's relatively easy to do the first time because the money's sitting there, but then following that, to maintain those, it will be reflected in what's necessary to operate. So
That was one of my worries. I saw there was 300,000 in new core services, and so we said, well, we should have skin in the game too on new core services. So 323. It'll depend on how much property tax relief or levy that you want to reduce versus if you add $1 million in new core services, if that's a one-time shot, do you make all of that up? And then where's Woodbury County's commensurate effort in that? Because we were looking at 300,000 and then said, well, we should have 323,000 just on a per population basis. If you all go up to 1 million, what's Woodbury County's effort in that? And so I'm not muddying the waters.
But, well, we will then be one entity, and it will be considered as an aggregate, not Woodbury separate. But I'm just putting that on everyone's radar, that when you do start those, and you designate those dollars, those designated dollars are one-time dollars that we currently have in reserve dollars that are not going to be there the following year, that will then be part of the asking in the future.
It's not sustainable with our present funding.
Exactly.
There's been a lot of numbers here. I got to ask a question here. If next year on this proposed 2.2 million ending balance of the 7 counties, that you were going to segregate funds for new core services, correct? But that would be for the entire 8-county region, correct? So we'd have to take out, they'd have to contribute their share to go into that 2.2 to cover those new core services. Otherwise, we are funding.
That's what
He's
Jared's
already-
talking about, the
That-
target.
that's your
I don't
323?
disagree with you.
Yeah, that's the
I don't disagree with you either, but I also think at some point, and it may not be next year's CECL that you'll be there, but I think at some point we need to think about being a region and getting back up into the regional activities that we want to benefit everybody. And
Well,
I
I'm
know
all
that-
for the
I
course-
know that's not a
expansion of the
statement
cour-
you want to
the-
hear from me, because I know we are really aiming towards parity, but I'm looking at it from the great benefit of the greater good. If we are going to invest $500,000 in a service that's going to benefit all the 8 counties within Rolling Hills, and we have the funds sitting there available to do it, then we do it knowing that all 8 counties get to access that service that we invest in. And
That's a little harder sell on a local
I
level,
know,
though, Don.
I know.
I tell my board and our taxpayers that we're funding services that are beneficial related to the acquisition of Woodbury coming into our region.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that's the kind of stuff that does come up.
Oh, I totally understand
And
that, but
and-
we're currently doing that within the 7-county region currently.
But
That's
there-
not a statement that you can say is only being anticipated or going to happen when Woodbury
That's an
joins.
unintended consequence. We grew the region. The nucleus that we started with, we grew that, and this is what we have. We went from an infant we're probably to a toddler. With the acquisition of Woodbury coming in, we're maybe going to a teen. And I think the circumstances that are different with the inclusion of Woodbury than the circumstances that happened because we had no model to base it on when we started the region and we grew. We were kind of flying by the seat of our pants. So I don't think that argument is 100% fair, because we do have 4 years of experience now. We have budget projections and we know what costs are. On day one when we formed the region, we were guessing.
I won't argue that point, but I do argue the idea that we had those same situations when we come together as a region. And and I've had a lot of discussions with folks. We're able to do things. I was not a fan of the regionalization, just quite frankly was not. We had to do it. Looking backwards now, I think it's worked out very well. The thing is, you can do things together that we couldn't do individually, and that's how I'm looking at it in the future. So when we have that discussion, I don't think it's real solid in that we have those same considerations when we went together initially as we do now, as far as you might have something available in Crawford that we don't in Sac or Calhoun, or I mean, we have those same considerations, and so in that way it's not any different.
There were winners and losers within the region.
And there probably always will be, and knowing that in a lot of things that we do in shares as a local entity, it usually over time averages out. And I just really believe that we can do things together that we couldn't have done individually. I know we do.
I don't expect there to be exact parity, there won't be, but I side with Cecil in the fact that I don't want to join with Woodbury County and be a big loser in the
No,
process.
I understand that, but I think to make that as a big point and or obstacle, we did those same things when we came together. So
Yes, we did.
go ahead.
Nice one. So I absolutely appreciate, in fact, when I found out the 300,000, I said, well, we ought to be in at 323, right? So there's 623, 625 sitting there. Is there any consideration to, this will be something that you all decide, but is there too much too soon or at one time where if there is $1.5 million to be spent in a single year, is that question valid that, for a one-time thing versus a 625 keeps us at some sort of parity? Is that a consideration where there's so much being spent in a single year that it's not being spent well versus some startup costs that do have parity? That's just a question I have. I don't know. But
That was my point, that you have to, even with the designation of funds, it's one-time money, and you have to absorb that in the following years. So you have to be very selective in prioritization as to what you choose to invest in. But
We keep talking about 2.2, aren't we really talking about 3.2? Because 2.2 is just the Fund 720. You still got 1 million of counties you got to shed. You're really talking about 3.2, aren't you?
Down to 25%, yeah,
So you got to shed about 2.5 million.
correct.
But not as
That's
far
hard
as
to do.
not as far as you're consideration. That
No,
will
that's
all
your-
be handled locally.
That's through you 7 counties, yes.
Right.
Have to shed
Right.
a lot of money, and I agree with you. You're going to get one time, or you start a program, then you come up and say, we aren't going to fund it, the program stops. It's going to be really tough. 2.5 million is a lot of money for 7 counties to spend and then not adopt it the following year or cut it off. That's a lot.
Well, and I just want to bring you back to, and I know there was some disagreement with this, but this was the request for information response that we received from DHS back in August when we had the questions about that county being assigned to us, if they don't have adequate funds to come in. And if you just refer to this, the premise of redesign is that a regional-based system will create quality and consistency in services across the state through the use of shared resources and costs over a larger geographic area. So the way I read this is that if a county comes in, it doesn't matter whether they can cover their costs or not. You're supposed to be investing in services that benefit the entire region. So which, throughout the course of this discussion, my question is, next year, am I going to be expected to segregate Woodbury County expenses from Rolling Hills so that we can find parity? Because I can tell you CSN does not do that adequately for us. When I requested services by residency just for Woodbury County, a few months ago, CSN kicked out 1.4 million in services, and you've seen what their budget numbers are. So I think, I just want you to be thinking about that, because if the expectation is that I have to track every Woodbury payment, I'm gonna have to do it probably on a separate system in an Excel file, because otherwise I'm not gonna have any good system to be able to extract those payments out of Woodbury County to show that we maybe subsidized Woodbury County to a certain degree. So I want you to be thinking about that, because honestly, that's gonna create a lot of work. Yep.
I'm gonna corral this thing here.
Thank you.
I think where we started here was the discussion of need or no need to amend our 28E arrangement. And I think we need to get back to that.
And I don't think you need to take action on this today. why don't I just finish up where I am recommending some changes, and then we can put this on the agenda to take action or not, either in December 27th or in our January meeting. We just need to have this, if Woodbury County needs to certify at a higher rate, we have to have the 2080 amended. And of course, there's timing in all of this because this has to be signed by all the counties plus the regional board. And so, I mean, we want to do it as early in January as possible if we have to.
On your yellow part, if you'll scroll down to it, it says and Woodbury County. I believe you're referring to the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors, and that should state that.
Yes, I agree. And then, do you want me to insert anything here in terms of, I mean, this is hard and fast, that they have to meet the MOU agreement.
I'm fine with it that way because I think everybody, you make those adjustments and figure out what you can afford to allow them to have the funds necessary to get in.
But the MOU states 1.8.
Yeah,
But I thought there was a reconciliation clause there.
There is,
It doesn't say 1 point, it says 25%, and it's $1 million
Wow.
reconciled in October.
25% is the 800,000.
Yeah,
And then it does state the million.
but we probably just, I know we had that in July, which is probably the one thing that probably would need to get changed. So you guys can do it, the rest of us, if we have to go to that, if we're gonna get down to that. Paying semi-annual at the end of the quarter, or like you said, in September.
Let's go ahead and, I guess you can, we're not gonna act on this today. Don can present different options as far as amendments here, and then we'll have to sort that out.
Yeah, and
later.
I can work with that a little bit.
well, what if you took that out?
What?
Just took that out, provided they fulfill the obligations of the MOU.
Because our last meeting, the discussion on the MOU was that we didn't want to just sign the 2080 and then have that supersede the MOU.
Can you amend the MOU?
That's up to the board.
And then you write an amended MOU.
The MOU was signed by both this board and the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors. It would just take both
You would have to
those
go back to both. Yeah.
people to
Yeah.
amend it.
Plus, Paul, because we have a signed MOU that all the counties approved with their resolution.
It goes to every
Goes
county.
to every county. And then once we bring up 2080, that has to go back. So,
Either way, going
yeah,
back
I
to
think,
law.
yeah,
But if we stay at 30%, if I'm understanding Dennis correctly, we may not have to do that. Right?
Right.
right.
But I just,
Go ahead, Darryl.
when you say stay at 30%, you mean as a whole?
As a
As a-
Rolling Hills entity with no consideration of locals. Because I think it's gonna be the intent that in this next year, the locals are gonna zero balance. So it's out of the picture anyway. Our arrangement was parity with the Rolling Hills entity. So those are the only figures that would be in consideration. Is that right?
My thing is, when I say 1.8 million, I mean the 25%, which is about 800,000 plus the million. My worry is if we bring that forward and you all reduce down and you hit 30%, we are going to be so far the disparity, and we're going to go through a reconciliation because it's allowed for in there. And my worry is we're going to be owed back $1 million. Plus, we're going to have to levy higher than 3049, and so we would need to exceed our per capita. We need to have an amended 2080 anyway.
I don't understand why you'd have to live higher than your 3049.
To raise the million.
They have the
He's
million.
already got the million, he's got
The million comes-
1.4 possibly coming back from Smooth River, so.
But you
But
still
it-
gotta get
but
the
that-
30% cash reserve too.
Dennis, what?
That is the cash reserve.
your 30,
No, we
49
don't have
on your
any
county,
tax
what does that
reserve.
generate for total dollars?
3349 covers our budget. But we don't have any money July 1st to cover our 25% till taxes come in. So we gotta have 25% there. It's a one-time investment. Because after that, if you spend it within your budget, that 25 is gonna be there every year.
So for example, we just looked at a tab that had 3363. That's above our 3049. So right there, plus if we're coming away with 1.4 from Sioux Rivers, and you're asking 1.8 up front, we're already at a $400,000 deficit, plus we gotta hit
Probably
3360.
just need to change the 1.8 July, it doesn't say July 1st, it says in July, but it probably needs to go into like September, because then your tax askings will take care of your 800,000, right? That 25% the first quarter, your taxes in September will pay for that like the rest of us when we pay in.
But we still don't have our reserve there start July 1st.
What reserve
That
are
you
you
will
talking
have.
about?
We need to match you guys.
That's that million.
That's the $1 million.
Yeah.
That's your first million that you bring forward.
So that 825 is kind of a moot issue then, because the million's covering that
I
825.
think it's an or issue. Right now it says and. We need 1.8 million.
No. It's- The MOU states Woodbury County will contribute 1 million to the Rolling Hills Reserve level in July of 19 to achieve financial parity on a per capita basis at the end of fiscal year 20. So basically, you're taking that $1 million that you're contributing in 19, that covers, and you gotta think about it a little bit differently, but that's gonna cover your expenses out of, that Rolling Hills is gonna be paying out of the Rolling Hills budget from July till September 30th. And then you're gonna have your tax money. But you're, at the 3049, you're gonna cover all your expenses for fiscal year 19. So that million, even though we took that first quarter payment out of it, basically gets stuck back in by your quarterly contribution. So then, at the end of fiscal year 20, if we're down to 800 and some thousand on the 90 some thousand population, we're down to upper 70s, 75, 77 dollars per capita. And that's a figure that comes out of that million that you gave us in July 1 of 19, and then we reconcile whatever there is at the end. You don't have to come up with $1 million up front, and then another $1 million in fiscal year, July 1 of 20, and then another 800,000 to cover your next quarter payment, if that made sense.
It does, because then we'd actually get a refund back at the end of June 20th. Say 700, we contribute, we get 300 back, then we're on parity with the ending balance.
If you get the upwards of $1.8 million from Sioux Rivers, and with what you're levying, yes, you could have a surplus.
Yep.
Are you all planning on going down to zero in your local county?
I think we have to, because
So if you, here's my worry. If you do that, and then you're truly at 874,000, which is what was projected, then all 7 counties have 874,000 sitting there at the end. We come forward with a 25% first quarter payment, and if we don't spend $1 more than our budget or $1 less, we would have about 828,000. If we start with 1.8 million, 1 million plus that, at the end of the year, if we haven't spent $1 more or less and we've been on the separate, we're going to have 1.8 million sitting there, and you're going to have 874,000. You're then going to go through a record.
I think that's not how I see it.
You'll be at zero, but your county balance will be at that 1 million plus, and then for that budget year, you can reduce your mental health tax asking, reduce it by that amount to get back on your county level to where you want to be.
And I would agree with that, but I thought that the terms of the 2080 right now, or that after that first year, we can't be at a separate, is that not the case, that you all could be?
Well, the levy has got to be the same, but if you have some money left over on the county, in your county budget, you can supplement your levy with whatever leftover funds you have, and you may not have to, you have to give us an amount equal to the regional levy. Whether it comes entirely from the levy or if you're using some leftover mental health funds on a county basis, as long as you give us a number that equals whatever the levy amount would be, they're fine, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they won't look at, the state won't look at that as an aggregate, that we have this extra million, and then we all have to reduce our levies equally. That's my,
Well,
my worry.
I think you're interlocking your county situation versus the entity. After the first year, everybody's appropriation on a per capita basis needs to be the same. And how, like we've been doing all these years, we've maintained an equal contribution on a per capita basis from each county, but you made that local choice how you were able to develop that money through levy or reserve balances. And that's what you're holding out there. That has to be shed by 2021, the local balance.
Yes. Actually, 2020.
2020.
June
At the
30th.
end of this next year.
Yep.
And
The
that's my
first year
worry,
Woodbury
if
County
it's
is with us,
not,
it has to be down
the-
to the 20.
and we have $1 million extra, my worry is that the mechanism that's in code right now is going to kick in, and then the shoe will be on the other foot, because we'll say, well, we've contributed an extra $1 million and everybody's levy is lowered
Well,
equally.
but you're not going to contribute that extra $1 million
No,
because
but
that's
part
held
of it.
locally.
That's gonna be held in your local account.
It'll still be part of the aggregate.
But it will be part of the aggregate.
That's my worry. We'll have an extra $1 million, and the only mechanism that's allowable in code right now is everybody's per capita is lowered equally.
Yeah.
And you say, well, we've got $1 million, even though it's coming back, it really can't come back to us because everybody's got to shed down to,
They never left you, though.
Yeah, but the way it is there, that million would still show up, and we're gonna pay the ramifications of it. We're gonna have to lower ours because that's gonna still. It's not gonna show as Woodbury County's money. It's gonna show as the region's money,
Even
and it
though
puts
it's
us over
sitting
our
in Woodbury
25%. It puts us over our 20%. We're gonna be penalized for that,
if
having
you
that
all
extra
kept
money.
the same on your local,
I think,
then we would be okay. If you all kept your county, we'd certainly have to exceed our per capita, but if you're going to zero, we're gonna just want to contribute, let's say, our 30%, not spend $1 more or less, and end up with 30%, which is about $936.
with our October 1st, 2020 reconciliation, I don't think giving it back or whatever would be any problem. It's in our memorandum of understanding.
Well, his concern is that they're going to be holding that locally. It's not that it's going to be in the Rolling Hills coffer. They're sitting with that kind of amount in their local account, of which then they're going to have to refund. Is it refunded equally among the counties on a per capita basis, or is it refunded only to the county holding it?
It states in code that it's attributable back to each county, and at that point, we're gonna involve Huntsman and Buzier because that is beyond my scope.
But if one county's holding say Woodbury's holding $1 million, is that then have to be split among all 8, or does it only go back to the
And it's attributed back to the county.
that
Individual
collected
county.
it? That collected it. All right.
So then you could have a taxpayer
We've been
holiday.
pulling dollars since the start, and so that's why I say if we end up with $2.5 million at the end of 2020, $1 million of it is Woodbury, and we've got $1.5 million, we can attribute that $1 million back, but then the $1.5 million has to be, out of all the contributions over our then 5-6 years, we'll have to go back to the individual counties for property tax relief in 2022. So that's gonna be a real challenge, which is why we need to get down as close to that threshold.
Does that clear up your concern? I think you were indicating that you were concerned about it having to go back to all 8 versus only to the county
Right,
that it
because
was
the only
collected.
thing I read in code, I understand that, Emily, the only thing I read in code is that at the end of 2020, it reduces, it's basically a forced property tax relief
Yep.
among all entities, and I don't see anything that keeps a separate, all funds from day one have to be forwarded to Rolling Hills. We've never seen where we can keep sort of a separate something back there, and that's my worry, is that we come up with $1 million, you go down to 0, and then we reconcile the $1 million back, but that's not really the way that code reads it. It happens. Everybody else, all the other 7 counties get a lower with us, and so.
Even though it's been collected in Woodbury County, is what you're saying?
Right.
Yeah.
But Jeremy, how would you get the $1 million back, or 887,000, whatever it is, would almost have to go to zero for you to get the $1 million back, right?
And essentially,
And we
you're
won't spend the
doing,
county
you have,
money all out and all of our whole region, that would take us to zero, right? How would you ever get the $1 million back, I guess?
if you went to an aggregate 25%, and right now your projection is that you're at 847,000, and you could basically double that, right? Because you have another 25% out there for each of your county reserves.
That's gonna be gone.
It will be gone, but you're down,
Our 25% is 847,000.
right, and if we
So
were,
we'd have to take that to zero for you to get the $1 million back, right?
no, because we'll still have 820, we never plan on spending our 25%. Right, it's something that's in Sioux Rivers right now, we bring over here, we don't spend $1 more or $1 less, and we still have it sitting there at the end of the year, we've taxed
Why
for
would
the
you
full
say you're
amount.
not spending your 25%? Because you're gonna have 4 payments of that into Rolling Hills to pay for your services here of $3.1 million, right?
Because that's money that we're bringing from somewhere else, it's already, we don't need to tax for that money. Right? We're going to tax 2 times to cover our expenses through the year, that's an in and an out, and then that's 25% is still sitting there, that 800 and some odd thousand. If we ask another million on top of that, that 820 some thousand still sitting there, you all have about 847,000 sitting there, but we have this extra million that we brought forward, and it's over and above.
But why would you tax your full in and out then if you got extra money sitting there?
That's a great question, because right now it says we have to, I mean, if we could take that $1 million off, then we would lower our levies way down, and we'd be fine with that.
So the 3049, does that that covers your services for this next fiscal year, correct?
Right, and if you add the 300 some odd thousand, it would be 3363.
All right, so the 3049 basically covers the mental health expenses, and whatever you get from Sioux Rivers, you have to come up with enough to come to parity with us, which we are projecting to be 800 and some thousand, which would be, in the upper 70s per capita. So with your capita, you're gonna look at about 800, somewhere around 800,000 out of what you get from Sioux Rivers to cover that. So I guess somehow you have to come to a somewhat more accurate, or a fairly accurate figure on what you're gonna get from Sioux Rivers, because we can't, for us on our end, we're guessing, and from what I'm hearing from you, you're kinda guessing too. But
We think it'll be about 1.4. We just need to know what is our upfront. If we can cover 30%, and you all say, hey, we're gonna end at 30%, we'll all be at parity. But right now, 30% for us is 936,000. But the MOU is essentially saying $1 million plus 25%. That's the language that we're trying to reconcile.
I agree with Dennis. I truly believe, from what I'm hearing, you have the possibility for a surplus. The only thing that's going to be a fly in the ointment is, and I don't know what you're doing internally, but to meet your levy, if you're using what your proposed money coming from Sioux Rivers is, to meet that 3067 or whatever it is, and you're not taxing the full 3067, yes, then you're going to be short. So if you're using that money to supplement your levy, yes, then you are going to be short. But Dennis is right. Your levy, if you levy the full 3063, that'll pay your yearly total services that are due, and you could take your money that you need to meet the per capita reserve out of that 1.4 million on the low side that you're going to get from Sioux River. You'll have money left over locally.
We'll just
Yeah,
reduce our
absolutely.
levy. We'll meet the per capita 33, but that excess money above that 33 plus 800,000, the extra money there we can use to reduce our levy locally. Make sure that comes down to the 874, and then there won't be any discussion about the million being spread out to all the counties. We're getting the tax relief.
I don't think
right
you
up
guys
front.
are on the same page.
No, I
Yeah.
think we are, because 30, we may not have to generate 33. We're gonna come across to the Sioux River, or to Rolling Hills with 33. but-
No,
but we got extra
exactly,
funds.
exactly. You do have to meet the 33 to
We are.
provide your
How we
service
meet that
requirement.
total
Right,
can be
right,
through-
we're on the same page there.
Yes.
Kind of the artificial thing in this is right now is the 1 million on top of the 25%. If you bump up to 30%, that's at 936,000. We're walking away from Sioux Rivers right now, our conservative estimate is 1.4 million. That's way above even a 30% reserve.
Or
It's-
lower your tax caps to get the target more close.
And we would be fine doing that. We just need to know, as of July 1st, do we need to come forward with 25% or 30%? And then do we need to come up with $1 million on top of it? That's the,
No, I don't think so.
You don't need,
You're
I
not, July
guess
1,
I-
you're not coming in with 25 or 30%, you're coming in with that million, according to the MOU. And that million's gonna cover that first quarter, but basically you're borrowing from the 30, 49, or whatever, whatever you levy to meet your fiscal year 20 mental health expenditures. See, that first 3 months, you are not gonna have any tax money in
Right,
your
right.
coffers, other than what you get from Rolling Hills.
you and I
or
are on
from
the
Sioux
exact
Rivers.
same page, Dennis. I
Yeah.
just don't think the MOU reads that way.
It
Right
does.
now,
Doesn't.
right now it says $1 million plus the 25%. And that's if it was $1 million
Where's
or,
the rest of that on there then? We got it.
Let me pull it up again.
If it
While
didn't,
she's
then-
looking, I got one more question. You guys supposedly paying semi-annually or quarterly?
We are paying quarterly.
Okay.
There was some
Semi-annually,
discussion about semi-annual if we zero our local balances.
And the reason that won't work is you have to have 25%. You're gonna pay over 25% quarterly. But if you don't pay that quarterly, you're gonna spend 50%. The region will be out of money for a period of time. Because you only got 25% for the first 3 months, but you aren't paying till semi-annually. You got 3 more months there, October, November, December. You haven't paid yet, so the region fund balance will be in the red.
The semi-annual we're getting at, I think, was October 1st. It's not on the year. Skip the first
Okay.
quarter, pay the second quarter, skip the third, pay the fourth.
Okay,
That way we
that
get our
would work.
taxes in.
As long as you don't
It's
wait
not
till
gonna be
December.
yeah, September or
Right.
March.
Right, that'll work.
Yeah.
Yep, yep.
Okay.
You're paying half and half.
Yeah.
It is there.
Agrees, Woodbury County agrees to cover all Woodbury County expenditures in fiscal year 1920 through a higher capital contribution than the rest of the counties if necessary to meet their obligations. Contribute the million in July of 19 to achieve parity on a per capita basis at the end of fiscal year 20 with reconciliation of this contribution to occur by October 1st, 2020. In addition to the contribution, item 7, Woodbury County will contribute their first quarter payment to the Regional Fiscal Agent Fund, July of 19. So yes, it's 1.8 in July.
That could be the one thing that could get changed if we're gonna go semi.
Yeah,
They
if
don't
we,
have
if
that
we
money sitting
modified paragraph 9,
They just gotta, then they go to semi like October 1st instead of July 1st.
You good with that?
Tax money for
Yeah.
their 25%, well, it'd be 50%, well, at that time, but
We just don't have to come up with 825. We give $1 million, reconcile that with a balance as of June 30th, 2020.
so would you
That's
just
what
be
we
striking number 9? Essentially, we give $1 million, that's a little above, it's about 32%. So, and if we didn't spend more and we didn't spend less, at the end of the year, we would be at about 32%. If you all are at 30, or if you all are at 40, we may owe a little, but we'd be within range.
Well, I kind of like number 9.
Well, yeah, you get extra money. But one more thing there, wouldn't you want to do the reconciliation before October of 20? Because then that fund balance will be sitting there with that money, and then it's going to be distributed because we can't change it. Wouldn't you want to do it sometime in June to have it hit before you have an ending balance? Say it comes to
June of
874. What?
June of what year?
June of 20. Because you want that ending balance to get down to
No, because
equal.
there's going to be the third quarter payments, or period 13 as you call it. So
Okay.
you're
And
gonna
we
have
won't know what
those.
the
So we can
bottom
cover
line
that.
is.
Okay.
Right,
You know,
so
we
that's
won't
why
know
we
if
said it was
we're
October.
heavy or light,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Sorry.
what if we just put in there a 9 to give a little flex? We'll have the option to pay the first quarter coming into the region, because we may go to semi-annual payments anyway.
Can I bring us back to the 2080? Because recall, this is signed by both parties. We have to go back to each individual county to
Oh.
get their ability or approval to do this. So that's why I was proposing in the the 2080 that we give some flexibility, because we have it specified as the 1 million plus 25%. And so I think if we can adjust the language in the 28E, then we have a little more flexibility.
When you change the 2080, what has to happen?
It has to be approved by this board and then taken back to all 7 counties to get a majority of those to sign on.
Is there going to be an issue if we have this MOU out there and it says that this is what will happen and we've signed on to it, or not?
We're gonna have a 3-hour conversation with each individual county to have them understand why we're doing this, so. No, I don't think it'll be an issue, because the whole game plan has changed with this 20 and 25%. And so, and maybe I'm being simplistic in my thinking on this, because we were really hung up on our conversation last Friday. So this is the way I view it. Woodbury County comes in July of 19, they contribute $1 million, which they're gonna get back from Sioux River. So that $1 million's gonna be sitting there. If they don't make their first quarter payment with the other counties that are gonna be contributing, then they get their taxes in September and they're gonna get half their taxes. So they're gonna get roughly 1.6 million in their taxes. That 1.6 million, then they can contribute their quarter payment or both at that time. They're gonna get their taxes in March and they're gonna get that 1.6. So they're gonna cover their 3.2 and their expenditures for fiscal year 20. And then at the end of the year, they're gonna come out at parity with our regional fund balance. Or am I just too?
No, that was the
exactly-
intent. That was the intent.
So that's
That's
how
exactly
this all started. I think that we've kind of circulated so much that I think it's just everybody's getting confused. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding this right. And maybe we can look at even instead of quarterly payments next year that you all, because of our fund balance sitting there, whatever we decide in levy or a per capita contribution, we just do it twice a year. So then Woodbury County is not only looked at as, oh, they're only paying twice a year. All counties can contribute, and we could just start that next year if you so choose. I mean, that's an option.
In that language allows that, saying that would be determined by the governance board, the payment schedule.
The 28 allows for it,
Yeah.
it does. But, yeah, I think Jeremy raised a good question too. I mean, it shouldn't be an issue for the counties to, because the game plan has changed. But there is this MOU that's sitting out there that says they have to contribute the $1 million and the 25%. So I think somewhere in one of the documents, it has to be clarified. And I think the easiest way to do it is in our 2080, because otherwise that MOU has to go out to all the counties first, and then you have to sign on it as well, or we make a recommendation back to the counties. And then we have to do the same process for our 28E. So I think a simple adjustment in the language of the 28E that allows a little more flexibility to this item number 9, and then we can take it out to the boards and explain what happened. And I've worked with all of your boards and long enough to believe that they would understand this process and that this is not some scheme for Woodbury County to be relieved of their obligations. And I would hope that as a board member, that if I were to bring this out, that you would assist me in explaining this with all clarity, that we are changing this as a result.
Well, that's why I said in the 2080, we changed that. We don't have to put that memorandum of understanding in there, in that language. We can make it, that's done in the 2080, not in this.
You're right, Paul. I mean, honestly,
That's where I
because
went back to that. Why not just take that MOU part out of that?
it could be any
What you put in
terms
there.
agreed upon by the governance board. Because, I mean, that's really actually forward thinking, because we could have other counties potentially wanting to join, and then we have this language specific to Woodbury County. And then it could be for any joining member county. But this is, I mean, I can work with that a little bit.
Everybody okay?
I think if you take obviously we voted no the first go round, and I can't think that would change, but I think if you take the 2080 around wanting a revised to be re-voted on by each individual county, yes, Don can say, you know, this is not specific to Woodbury, but everybody's gonna fill in the dots and think they know that it is. And I guess if it wouldn't pass by the majority of counties on the re-signing, then we're all out of business.
I
So any
feel.
2080
go ahead.
that
You
you
go back to the
change
original.
on any commission we're on, take Central Iowa. Whenever a new county comes on, that 2080, all they do is the 2080 stays the same. They just add another county, but it goes to every county again for It's a new 2080 because they put a new county in there. I mean, all they're doing is adding one county's name to it, but it goes back to every county that's a member to redo a 2080. And I see that as the same here. We're not changing 2080. We're just going to add another county in here. To me, that'd be the simplest way to do it. I still just say, forget that MOU part of it. You know, any 2080s we have with any other county and any other thing, if another county is brought into that has to be a part of that 2080, all you do is change the, you know, instead of listing 6 counties or 7 counties, now we're going to list 8 counties as a member of this 2080.
That part's pretty straightforward, but you're also changing the funding mechanism as a result of that.
Well, we can put in there the flexibility. I mean, that because we're going to change it anyway. Well, I guess you said it's not in there where we pay quarterly.
But if it's worded properly, you still can, by the determination of the governance board. I mean,
Yeah.
if it's written that way, it still comes back here to determine what path you're going to take, right?
And still has to be passed by the individual boards.
Yeah.
But the recommendation will come from here. I know it's a lot more. It's but I think we can do it all through the.
This doesn't
2080.
change and Woodbury pays quarterly, like you said, anyway, I don't see it being a problem.
That part I don't either. I mean, as long as we get to the full pot at the end of the year, I don't care.
Yeah.
And how we pay is immaterial to us, however you want us to pay.
And
is
we've
fine.
done that amongst ourselves since the inception. Some of us have been using reserves, some of us had to fully levy. It's just,
And I think it was important to us at one time, and it still should be, that we have their admitted to our region and the 2080, provided they meet the memorandum of understanding. By taking that out of there, 2080, that language out of there, we're kind of setting ourselves up.
well, then we have to change the memorandum of understandings.
Well, it's
I still think that $1 million could come back and bite us all in the end.
What I will do,
You're
based
right.
on this conversation, is I will go back and give you some language options, and I can send that out to you just in an email. And then you guys just need to think about it before our next meeting. I do have a couple of other changes, not to, move this along, but there's some other things as I review the 2080 that we're not following, that I think that if we're gonna open up our 2080, I think it's time to make some adjustments. Simple things like under regional staffing, we were going to divide amongst ourselves administrative responsibilities. That's not the way we're doing it, and there is nobody that's designated in community management, communications management, compliance management, or process. So I really think that this could be adjusted, because we've really, I think when we started, we wanted to be able to separate some of those responsibilities, and then we realized that it needs to fall under one role. And so that's the way we function, is that those roles are all within the CEO function. And then the last thing is regional finances. We have it listed that member county contributions to the region will be on an equal per capita basis, period. And so then I inserted this for discussion because, just to clarify, that a new county that is joining may provide a higher per capita in the first year as a member of the region, or a new member, because it's not clearly stated that way. And so to follow our 2080, I think we need to make that adjustment in the language, because our current one states it's equal. And then I received clarification from a couple of county attorneys back in January on that they indicated that the first year a new member county could come in on a higher per capita, but then subsequent years, they need to be on equal footing. So I think just to clear it up, I think we need to make some adjustment in that language that a new member county could be at a higher per capita the first year to meet their financial obligations. Those are my two changes to the 2080.
Well, this copy I have, Dawn, on that 7 regional finances doesn't have your,
Yeah, mine is.
it doesn't have this in there.
Mine,
so-
mine doesn't either.
I don't think the one in our ring binder is as up to date as the one that you sent us by email.
I sent you the current, what we have. These are just proposed changes to the
She did,
Cherokee Woodbury.
so you
I
did
thought
highlight the changes done.
I thought I
No,
gave you
You
the
didn't have
copy
the
with the
strikeouts,
highlighted.
but it has how you have it worded
Yeah,
out.
mine's-
Uh-huh.
It's typed how you have it there.
See-
it doesn't
see
show
the
the
one-
changes.
It's not showing, oh, you know
It's not
why?
showing what the old was that you took
When I
out.
printed it, I took off the
See
marking.
that? That's what mine looks like.
Because otherwise you were gonna get all of
I've got
the
that too.
garbage that I have up here from when we first developed. So I printed it, you're gonna see the highlights that I'm proposing as changes, but you're not gonna see all of this stuff because this is the markup.
Yeah, I know, I've got that too, but I.
I'll
give
take
this
off the
my
markup and it
copy
will
of that email, put my notes on it.
All right. Any other discussion? From anyone? We have currently scheduled 12/27 at 1 PM in this building for our next meeting. And
I thought she had the law center for the next meeting.
And on your email, you had the law center.
in the book, it's St.
Oh,
Harry.
in the book it says,
And what?
In our binder, it says Harry Rasmussen.
Right, I have both the December meetings booked here. And then when I talked with Cecil yesterday, we had planned to meet on the 27th at 1 o'clock, but he has another retirement for one of his board members at 4 o'clock in medicine that day. So if he's gonna be able to participate in Rick's retirement farewell party, I think that we should do a morning meeting. If that works for everybody.
but it's going to be here and not the law center. Your email said the law center.
I think the law center was for the new supervisors, isn't it? You're still-
Or what?
Yeah, that's the one you're
Oh, it's
referring to.
18. Oh, that could be.
That's the 18th.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's
All right.
the 18th at the
All
Law
right.
Enforcement Center with the new supervisors.
Pardon me, I'm
And
wrong.
I'm glad you brought that up, Preston.
Yeah.
Just as an FYI before I adjourn, I have notified all of the new incoming supervisors, just a regional training 101. And so far I've gotten Jim Whistler, Brett Wilhelm, and Kelly Snyder confirmed, and then the other 3 I'm waiting to hear back from.
You have not heard back from our new soup yet?
No,
Okay.
but I just sent that out yesterday.
Oh, okay.
To the 3 others that I was not aware of.
So on the 27th, and we're looking at 9 o'clock here.
Here.
Yes.
Oh, it's not.
I'll be on
What were you?
I can't make that one.
We really need a full board.
We need a full board to make the decisions. So will 1 o'clock work?
Yes.
Okay.
Earlier works, but I got a doctor's appointment at 9.
But that that's Cecil's conflict.
Yeah, I'm either going to be, I can make the meeting, but as soon as the meeting's over, I'm going to have to leave, and there won't be no time to socialize with you. I mean, in fact, I got to be on the road by 3 o'clock to make the 4 o'clock down there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we could look at another date. That was just proposed.
How about, could we start at noon? That would give me another hour. Would that work for you, Dennis?
Yeah, I'll make it work.
I'll make noon work. I'll just,
Okay. Well, I'm just thinking here. Do you want to do like a luncheon for Rick before our meeting? Or do you just want to have lunch before we start and then have a retirement afterwards?
I think we should start on time, because if we've been 3 hours today. If we start on time, we can kind of judge our time a little better.
There was a lot of stuff.
I
today,
know there
Cecil.
was. There
And
was
the
a lot of
next
stuff.
board meeting is going to be
It's
a
going
lot
to be,
of stuff.
yeah, it's going to be pretty.
full.
Doesn't matter to me at all, it's whatever you guys,
Gonna have Dennis
What works?
home by 9 o'clock.
There you go.
what do you guys want to do? It's entirely up to you.
Noon's fine with me.
How about you
I
guys?
can go anywhere.
I can't be here anyway. I'll be gone the
Noon's
27th,
fine.
but he'll be here.
Okay.
So are we looking at noon then?
It's entirely up to you, whatever.
Well,
Paul?
and then,
Noon, okay?
They- Yeah. I'm fine on any day.
and then I'll set a time limit by sending out notice of your retirement party at a certain time, 3 o'clock. And then we just, do you want to just try to get through in 3 hours?
Well, how many hours? 2 hours?
3?
Noon to 3.
Well, then I'm in the same deal. I mean, I guess,
Noon
I'm
to
in,
2.
I would like to have a little sociability with you, but I also feel like I have an obligation to
And I
the
understand.
guy that I sat next to at the board meeting to be there for his.
Absolutely.
Would 11?
That works for me too.
11 o'clock? And then I'll just, well, sometimes lunch can be.
A working
slow things
lunch?
down. Yeah, I'll have some food and snacks here so that we can just kind of work through. And then we could schedule the retirement party at 3, so that's still good.
Well, but that takes him out. We got to do it before. then.
Well,
11
2,
yeah,
2:30.
Yeah,
Yeah, it gives us till
if we started at 11 and it was done by 2,
So if we started at 2:30 for Rick, then that would give
You
you.
could
a
stay
good
a little
time.
longer.
yes.
So
We'll give
we're
you time.
11 o'clock now.
I'll give you time to sober up.
Jeez.
Well, we're gonna have, might be something else in the punch.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't have any flexibility.
Louise will have to drive you home.
All right,
Are we good?
we're 11 o'clock.
11 o'clock on the 27th. We ready to adjourn?
Are we going to approve the budget then?
No, we're going to decide what we're funding, and then the budget will be
It will not be ready.
January.
Okay.
in January.
I do have a question though, Don, going just back to that 2080, that last part where you took it off there. Then I don't show, we are gonna have a language in there that says we do allow a new member to be at a higher,
Yep,
cause this doesn't, the way I have it in my book doesn't say anything.
it's right here. Member
Oh,
county
may provide,
contributions
okay, I was
will be
looking down
for
below
capital.
it, okay,
Yeah, I wrote it.
Thank you.
I
Okay.
just underlined it, yeah.
okay, yep, okay, thank you. That's all I needed.
Anything else? I would entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. Is there a second?
Yes.
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thanks, everyone.